Every village has its stars, every family has its golden child. But in Cameroon, where envy moves like a shadow, even brilliance can be dragged into darkness. They will tell you failure is laziness, but let me whisper a truth. Sometimes failure is designed, stitched into dolls, whispered into ashes, tied into knots of jealousy. This is the story of Boris, a boy who should have flown high, but instead was pulled down by the hands of his own blood. In the small quarter of Ntarinkon, Boris was the name of every teacher's lips. Ah, that boy. He will be somebody, his headmaster would say, tapping his chalk against the blackboard, eyes glittering with pride. At just 12 years old, Boris had a gift. He absorbed lessons like the ground drinks rain. His handwriting was neat like the weave of a basket. His memory sharp like the edge of a new machete. When exam results were posted, his name always sat proudly at the very top. At the very top. Parents pointed at him as an example to their children. Look at Boris. Now so Pikin supposed learn. His brilliance was not just his own. It was the joy of his father, a carpenter with cracked hands, and his mother, a market woman whose sweat built his school fees coin by coin. Boris' success was their song, their pride, their future. He was a hope wrapped in uniform and books. But in every family, there are eyes that do not shine with joy. There are hearts that do not clap when the others rise. And in the corner of his family's house, one such pair of eyes followed Boris everywhere, his auntie, Nadia. Nadia was his father's younger sister. She had lived with them for years. After a failed marriage sent her crawling back home. At first, she helped with chores, laughed with neighbors, and played the role of the helpful sister. But slowly, something darker grew in her heart. Each time Boris came home with prizes, a new book, a certificate, a handshake from the principal, her smile tightened. Hey, this boy wants show say na only he sabi. She would mutter under her breath. When neighbors congratulated the family, calling Boris a future doctor, Nadia's stomach churned. She had no child of her own, no husband, no life people praised. To her, Boris' success was a mirror of her own failure. And the envy, when left to fester, is like fire hidden under the dry grass. It waits for wind. One night, while everyone slept, Nadia sat by the dim light of a kerosene lamp. Her hands trembled as she tied pieces of cloth together, stuffing them with ashes from the hearth. She whispered Boris' name into the door, her voice low, like a curse crawling out of her throat. Let your light die, small boy. Let your steps stumble. Let your parents cry because of you. She laughed softly, bitterly, as she picked the doll with a pin. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it a whisper of things not meant to be heard. From that moment, Boris' life began to turn. The first sign was small, a spelling test, something Boris could ace with his eyes closed. But that morning, his mind went blank. Simple words looked strange, twisted. He wrote nonsense. His teacher frowned in disbelief. Then came mathematics. Boris, the boy who could multiply faster than the teacher's chalk, suddenly forgot how to divide. His classmates laughed when his answer was wrong. Now Boris this? We sabi book pass all man? Ah, shame oh. At home, his father's voice thundered. You better stop playing, boy. You think we dey waste money send you for school for you to bring disgrace? His mother shook her head, confused. Maybe he's tired, maybe not just stress. But Nadia sat silently in the corner, her lips curled into a secret smile. That night, Boris dreamed of a doll. Its stitched eyes glowed red, and each time he tried to read from his exercise book in the dream, the doll stabbed itself with a pin, He woke up sweating, heart pounding, unable to explain the terror that clung to his skin. From that day, the cracks widened. Every test became a struggle. Teachers began to doubt him. Friends stopped coming around, and each failure was another nail hammered in his spirit. The golden boy was turning into a shadow, and no one, not even his parents, could see the invisible hand pulling him down. In the daylight, Nadia was a picture of innocence. She washed the dishes, fetched water, even scolded Boris softly when his father's anger boiled over. "Brother, no vex too much," she would say. "Na pikin. Sometimes them get stubborn days." Her words soothed the parents, but behind them was poison. At night, she became something else. She whispered Boris' name into ashes mixed with palm oil, smelled it on the door, then hid it under her pillow. Her laughter was the kind that would make even dogs whine in their sleep. She visited a small mud hut at the edge of the village, home of an old marabout. "Your envy is strong, woman," the marabout said, his voice crackling like firewood. "Make the boy forget everything he knows, let him become useless. Then his parents go see you as the one holding the family together." He gave her charms tied with red cloth, a powder that smelled like burnt iron. She carried it home, sprinkling it where Boris sat, where he slept, even in his food. The mask of the caring aunt in the day, the witch of envy in the night. And Boris was caught between her two faces. Boris knew something was wrong. He could feel it in the way his head throbbed whenever he tried to read. Words twisted, numbers melted. Even his once clear thoughts turned into fog. When he tried to speak to his mother, she dismissed it. "Stop complaining. You're just a lazy nowadays." When he tried to explain to his father, the man's anger grew hotter. "You think life na play? If you know one book, you go join me for bush cut plank." Each word was a wound, deeper than the beatings that sometimes follow. Boris began to withdraw. He stopped playing with his friends. He stopped dreaming about becoming a doctor. His only comfort was drawing lines in the sand behind the house, whispering to himself. But the dreams kept returning. The doll with glowing eyes, laughing while he failed again and again. Sometimes in the dream, the doll was his aunt's face. Sometimes it was just a shadow, but the laughter was the same. He could not explain it. He was only 13, but the truth was simple. The boy was drowning, and no one could see the water. Parents can carry love in one hand and suspicion in the other. As Boris' failures multiplied, his father's pride crumbled. In the beer parlor, men mocked him. "Your son no na bright star again. Maybe na juju dey hide inside book before." His mother grew cold. She started comparing him to the other children. "See your friend Patrick. He passed exam. Why you no fit?" It was Nadia who played the role of comforter. She would hold the mother's hand and sigh. "Sister, maybe the boy just no serious. You try your best. Some pikin them no dey grateful." Each word was a knife, driving the parents further from their child. At night, when Boris cried silently into his pillow, Nadia sat awake, watching him with eyes that glittered with victory. But envy is never satisfied. It eats and it wants more. Soon, Nadia would not want Boris to fail. She would want him destroyed completely. One evening, when the cicadas screamed in the bush and the moon looked swollen, Nadia returned from the marabout's hut with a fresh calabash wrapped in raffia leaves. Inside was a fine black powder. The marabout had said, "Sprinkle this where his shadow touches. He go dey forget not just book, but himself." That night, while Boris curled like a small bird, she walked softly into his room. She sprinkled the powder across the floor, across the bedpost, across his forehead. The next morning, Boris woke up confused. He stared at his exercise book, unable to read his own handwriting. His teacher's words slipped from his mind before he could write them down. By the end of that week, he failed a spelling test every child in class had passed. The teacher shook her head. "Boris, what happened to you? You'll not be the same boy again." He looked down, ashamed, unable to answer. The powder had worked. But what Nadia didn't know was this: each grain of that black dust carried a cost. Magic may obey envy for a time, but in the end, it always demands payment. Boris' life turned into a cage. At school, classmates mocked him. "Book don't run for your head," they jeered. Some called him zombie. Others laughed when he stumbled over words. At home, his father stopped asking questions. He spoke with silence, the kind that cut deeper than a cane. His mother began avoiding him, ashamed when neighbors whispered. Only Nadia pretended to care. She gave him food when others ignored him. She patted his shoulder when he failed again. She made sure his parents saw her kindness, while her laughter grew sharper inside. Boris retreated into himself. He began sitting near the stream after school, throwing stones into the water, whispering prayers no one taught him. He prayed not to God, not to the ancestors, but to anyone who could hear. "Why me? If somebody do me bad, let it stop. Please let it stop." Sometimes he felt the wind stir strangely when he spoke. Sometimes the water rippled without a stone falling. But he never told anyone. Who would believe him? Nadia believed she was untouchable. She strutted around the compound like a queen of shadows. But one night, as she performed her ritual, something shifted. She tied Boris' name to the doll again, stabbing a needle into its chest. Suddenly, the flame of her oil lamp shot high, nearly burning the roof. She gasped, dropping the doll. The needle snapped. From the corner of the room, she heard a whisper, deep, old, not human. "You have taken too much." Nadia froze. She turned, but there was no one. The room was empty. The doll lay on the floor, its eyes glowing faintly. The next morning, she laughed it off. "Now my mind they played trick," she told herself. But across the compound, Boris woke with a strange strength in his chest. For the first time in months, he wrote a full sentence without forgetting. And somewhere deep, far beyond the reach of envy, something ancient had begun to listen to the boy's cries. Madame Elise, Boris' form teacher, was not a woman who believed in charms. She believed in books, in chalk, in discipline. But one night, she had a dream. She saw Boris standing on the school field, but he had no shadow. Instead, the dark rope tied him to the ankles of a laughing woman, faceless but cruel. Each time Boris tried to run, the rope yanked him back. She woke in sweat, the image burning in her eyes. The next day at school, she watched him stumble through another failed recitation, and her heart broke. During recess, she whispered to him, "Boris, my child, somebody they hold you, but listen, no rope they last forever." Boris blinked, confused. How did she know? Nadia's doll had become her treasure. She fed it palm oil and ashes, whispering curses at midnight. But one evening, when she lit her lamp, she found a hairline crack running down the doll's face. She panicked. She tried sealing it with new blood, but the crack grew wider. That night, Boris dreamed. He saw himself standing in the forest, a heavy chain on his neck. Suddenly, the chain broke with a loud snap. He woke up gasping, sweat soaking his shirt. For the first time in months, he felt lighter. The next day, he solved the math problem without struggle. His teacher raised her brows. His classmates turned, whispered, "Maybe him luck don't turn small." Nadia, watching from a distance, clenched her fist. She doubled her curses that night, swearing the boy would crawl back into failure. But every time she stabbed the doll, the crack widened. People talk. They always do. In the village market, whispers began to spread. Now wetin happened to Boris? That boy wey dey shine before. Now who dey do am? Some pointed fingers at witchcraft in general. Others mentioned Nadia's suspicious smiles. A few old women simply shook their heads. Spirit no dey sleep forever, they murmured. The one wey hold that boy go soon pay. Nadia heard the rumors. She smiled publicly, but her night became restless. The doll groaned when she touched it. Shadows moved strangely in her head, and Boris, though still struggling, now walked with a spark of resistance in his eyes. He didn't know it yet, but the balance had started to shift. News of Boris' strange downfall reached Pastor Mfor, a fiery preacher known for exposing witchcraft. He came to the house one Sunday, Bible in one hand, anointing oil in the other. He prayed, his voice thundering through the walls. He sprinkled oil in Boris' head, commanding every chain to break. Boris trembled, tears streaming down his face. For a moment, his parents believed the nightmare had ended. But Nadia stood outside, biting her lips so hard blood trickled down her chin. Later that night, she danced naked with a cracked doll under the moonlight, whispering, "As long as this doll breathes, that boy no go ever stand tall." The following week, Boris failed 3 subjects in a row. The pastor's prayers faded like smoke in the Harmattan breeze. Years rolled by. Boris fought through Form 5, lower state, and finally reached upper state. By now, he was a shadow of his former self. Once brilliant, now a boy weighed down by invisible chains. He sat for the GCE exams, his pen shaking as though an unseen hand dragged it. Questions he had studied slipped from his memory like water through a sieve. When results came out, his name was there, but under the long, bitter word failed. His mother wailed. His father paced in silence, unable to meet his son's eyes. Boris locked himself in his room, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how one life could be cursed so badly. Nadia, from her corner, smiled. The doll was almost destroyed, but it had done enough damage. The village children once looked up to Boris. Now they mocked him. "See bookman, wey book don kill," they laughed. With no certificate, no job, no direction, Boris drifted. He loitered by the roadside, watching others move forward with their lives. The once shining star was now just a shadow walking without purpose. At night, he often dreamed of a doll, a golden doll glowing in the dark. Each time he reached for it, the sound of a woman's laughter pulled him back. He would wake up, panting, sweat-soaked, lost. The villagers whispered, "Now so bright children they spoil when witch hand touched them." And yet, some said Boris' story was not finished. They claimed the crack in the doll meant something greater was coming, that his suffering was only the beginning of a darker tale. But for now, Boris wandered, broken, forgotten, suspended between despair and a destiny yet to unfold. Boris finishes opposite with failure, stripped of hope, wandering like a vagabond. But the imagery of the cracked doll and the golden doll in his dreams teases that maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end.